today we're going to be working on a program called Devow.c, which reads characters from its input and writes the same characters to its output, except it doesn't write lowercase vowels. So the first thing I'm going to do is use gedit to create our file. So I'll type in gedit devow.c and an ampersand so we can still use our terminal. Great. So the first thing in our file is going to be what we call a header comment, which just explains what the file does and its author and its date. So I'm just going to give it a title of Devowelling text, and I'm going to explain given text input, print the characters which are not lowercase vowels. In this case, we don't need to remove uppercase vowels, only lowercase vowels. The author is Dean Wonder, and the date created is 2018-04-18. Great. So the first thing to do here is to write out our hash includes. In this case, we're going to need to hash include one thing, which is studio.h. Fantastic. Now, let's get straight into our int main void function. And I'm just going to return 0. Great. So what I want to do here is to not actually make the program itself straight away. The first thing I want to do is to make a program which acts kind of like a parrot, where we give the program input and it will just output exactly what we tell it. And then we can modify this program later on to remove lowercase vowels. So first of all, I want to create a variable called character, which will be set to the first character that the program reads in. So I'm just going to write out int character is equal to getChar. And you might be confused because we're using a function called getChar, which you might expect returns a char value, and we're assigning it to an int value. This is because in C, characters are actually represented by numbers, so it's perfectly okay to do this. Furthermore, getChar sometimes doesn't return a character, it returns a special int, which is hash defined and called EOF, which stands for end of file. And we'll be using this later on, but if we were to assign that to a char variable, it wouldn't work as well. So, and I'm just going to put a comment above this line, which just says get the initial character. And then we're going to write out another comment, because what we're going to do here is we're going to loop through every character, and we're going to be printing the ones which aren't vowels. Fantastic. So what we need here is a while loop, and I'm just going to write out a while loop. We're going to leave the condition blank for the moment, because I don't know what to put in there, but what we're going to have inside the while loop is 2 lines of code. So the first line of code is going to be putChar, which is kind of like getChar's sibling function. Instead of reading in a character, it prints it out. So we're just going to give it the character variable. And then the next thing we're going to do is to reassign the value of the character variable. So we're going to say character is equal to getChar again. And so this will, what it will do is it will set the character variable to the next character in the input. So initially this character will be set when we first run the program, it'll be set using this line. Then we can print that character, but then when we go to the next iteration of the while loop, we need to change what the character is so that we can look at the next character in the file that we're reading. Okay, so this while loop, the condition we need to have is it needs to be true while the character is, while there's still a character there, but false once we reach the end of input. And so the way we'll know that we've reached the end of input is when the character value takes on the value EOF. And so what we're saying here is to do this code repetitively while the character value is not equal to end of file. In other words, if it's equal to anything else. But once it's equal to end of file, we'll exit this loop and continue down here. So that's all I want to do for the moment. Let's save and compile this program and have a look at how it works. So I'll go to my terminal, dcc-o devow, and devow.c. Okay. So the program's compiled successfully, which is good. Let's run the program just by saying deval. And I'll press enter. So currently the terminal is actually waiting for us to give it input. We're currently kind of sitting on this line in the program. Int character equals getChar, and it's waiting for us to give it a character. You might expect that when I press down a character, say I type A, you might expect that it prints it out straight away. And certainly if you look at the code, that's what you'd think would happen. You'd say, okay, now character is assigned to the value A, and we print it out straight away since we entered this while loop. Actually, what's happening here is I can type as many characters as I want, and it's not until I press enter that it gets printed back out to me. And the reason is because when I'm typing these characters, they're actually stored in the terminal. The terminal hasn't actually told the program about these characters yet. It's stored in a buffer, what we call a buffer, and then once I press enter, it all gets sent in one package to our program. So that's why I print it out all in one go. If I want to end this program, we need to kind of send an end of file character. So, and to do that, we just press Ctrl D. And that will end the program. Okay, so now we need to change the program into something which will not print out lowercase vowels. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to surround this statement here, the printing out of the character, with an if statement. And we're going to design an if statement here, which is true if the character is not a lowercase vowel, but false if it is a lowercase vowel. And so that's actually kind of a complex thing, so what I'm going to do is use a function. I'm going to call that isVal. And I'm going to give this function that we're going to make the character that we're working on. And then this function can either return 0 or 1, which is the equivalent of false and true for C. And then it'll work perfectly with the condition. So I'm going to add a exclamation mark in front of this. And what this means is that if the character is not, the exclamation mark changes it to not. If it's not a vowel, then we print out the character. So now all we need to do is create this function. So it's going to be int isVal, and we're going to give it a char character. The reason why I'm using a char value here and not an int is because once we've entered this while loop, we're guaranteed that the character is actually not equal to end of file. So it's going to be a legitimate character, and we can assign it to a char variable just fine. Okay, so the way this function is going to work is I'm going to assume that the result is going to be not a vowel, and then I'm going to update that result based on what we examine character to be. So actually the first thing I want to do is make a little comment above the function. It's important to make these comments above functions to explain what they do. So I'm just going to say isVal takes in a single character and returns 1 if it's a lowercase vowel, otherwise returns 0. Great. So we're going to assume that we're going to be returning 0, so I'm just going to say int result is equal to 0, and then return result. But what we're going to do between these two lines of code, between our assumption and our return value, is update our assumption based on what character actually is. So I'm going to write an if statement, which is going to be something like, if it's a lowercase vowel, then we'll set result equal to 1. Great, so this condition is going to be quite a long one, so let's write it out. It'll be if character is equal to A, and remember we're using single quotes here because we're using a character variable. Don't use double quotes, they mean something else. Or character is equal to E, or character is equal to I. Now this is getting fairly long, so I'm going to go on to the next line. Actually I'll write or and next line. Character is equal to O, or character is equal to U. Fantastic. So if it's any of these values, if it's A, E, I, or U, it will set the value of result to 1 and return result. And this result value, whether it's 0 or 1, will be used in the if statement up here. So if it's 0, this not value will actually, it'll change it to a 1. And if it's 1, the exclamation mark will change it to a 0. And then in this way, this if statement basically says if it's not a val, then print out the character. So this should work. Let's save it and compile. Right, so we're getting a compile error here. It's saying, warning, implicit declaration of a function isVal is invalid. And it's happening on line 17. So let's have a look at line 17. Here's line 17. What's happening here is we're calling a function called isVal, which we've defined down here. But seeing as the C compiler kind of looks through your code from the main function, once it gets to line 17 and sees isVal, it doesn't really know what it is because it hasn't seen the isVal function yet. So we need to use what we call a function prototype to tell C about the isVal function. And so what we do is we copy this line of code except for the curly brace and put it above the main function, and then just add a semicolon on the end. And so this is called a function prototype, and it will tell C about the function isVal, which is below, and then C won't complain when it sees isVal in your code. Okay, so let's save this and try recompiling. First of all, I'll just clear. And then we'll recompile. Great, so we haven't got any compile errors. Let's try running the program. Fantastic. So we're waiting for some sample text here, and I'm just going to I'll just write sample text, and then I'll write AEIOU. So the idea is here that our program should remove the A from sample and both of these E's, but it should leave these uppercase vowels alone. So let's press enter and see what happens. Perfect. So we've removed the A, both the E's, and left the uppercase vowels alone, which is exactly what we wanted to do. Okay, so and then I'll press Control D to exit our program.